I'd like to welcome you and say thank you for voting by being in the seats you are and having here at this session about global eduroam. What we're going to be talking about today is a bit different than what the conversations about eduroam were yesterday, which were really on the client side of things. Here on the other side of the coin is what do you need to do to expand eduroam and operate eduroam in different environments, different backgrounds and different countries and different regions. And so we have a lineup of speakers, as you see on the screen here, Guy Holtz from Rhodes University in South Africa, Philippe Hanset in US eduroam, and Neil Witheridge from AARNet in the Asia Pacific region. And we're going to get started with Guy about eduroam in the South African townships. Come on up. You have the mic, or you can use that. Okay. Great, thank you, and let's get started.
Okay, so my name is Guy Holtz, and I come from a small rural university in South Africa. And what I'm going to talk about is a little project we ran to extend eduroam wireless coverage into municipal libraries. Now, on the face of that, that might sound like a relatively straightforward thing to do, and technically it probably is. What I'm looking at here is more the softer side of it, the realities of doing this in a country that really has very little infrastructure. And the paper I put together is a case study of why we did it, how we did it. There's some technical stuff in there and what we learned in the process. And the lessons weren't what we expected, but I'll get to that just now. So let's start with where I'm from. So we started off there and we go right down to the bottom of Africa, and I really wish the flight was this quick. And so we come into the Eastern Cape, which is the poorest province in the country. And we come to a really little town surrounded by a lot of farmland. Grahamstown has a population of 70,000. Now, unlike when Porto told us that they had a population of 125,000, we have no larger metropolitan area. So 70,000 is it. We're 130 kilometers from the nearest major town and the nearest commercial airport. And we're surrounded by pineapple farms and game lodges and things like that. Rhodes is the smallest university in South Africa by a factor of about half. The next university has over 20,000 students. We have 7,300 full-time students. We have 1,200 staff members, and we're 45% residential. We participate in global projects like the SKA. We have quite a large contingent of our physics department working on the SKA problem. And as a university, we have one of the highest research outputs per capita. But it's in the context of being very, very small. And the reason I'm painting this picture is to try and contrast it later on. So universities in South Africa have better than average internet access. We have the South African Research Network, which has built an NREN, and the figures on the right are my desktop PC at work, and that looks really good. That's my PC at home at 8 megabit. That's ADSL. That's better still than the majority of the country. So we have this big divide between what I experience in my office and what I experience at home. And that divide gets even worse for the poorer populations where ADSL simply isn't available. So as a university, we have 500 access points. We have coverage in 140 buildings. Every single one of them carries eduroam. This makes things really quite nice for students. And all of our students get free capped access to the internet. So that's the norm of the life of a university student. The problem is that an increasing number of students live in townships. Now, townships in the South African context are underplanned areas. They exist from the apartheid era. They were not very well serviced. They lack basic infrastructure. Many of them don't have running water. And South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient in the world. Gini is a measure of wealth inequity. So at 65, that's the top end of it. Portugal is 38. Those numbers don't mean a lot, but pictures show a bigger story. So that's a photo of a university campus, our university campus. That could be anywhere in the world. This is my trip down to the local township. So this is the main road going into the local township. And this is a shack. And we have students living in shacks like this. So this represented a drive that I took of 7 kilometers. So we go from really, being first world to people who live in shacks like this. So this is the problem I have. The problem I have is that the people who live in places like this don't have ADSL. At best, they have a cellular network. The cellular coverage is really spotty. 3G, maybe, no, more like 2G sometimes. And so in the 7 kilometers between the university and their home, our students transition from a really technology-rich environment to having basically no internet access. And that's a really big problem. In a world where there is an increasing reliance on internet for teaching and learning, where we have learning management systems that are the only source of your course materials, to say to students, well, sorry, you can't have access to teaching materials from home. Worse than that, because these are the poorest of the students, they're the sort of people who walk to campus because the taxi fare is too expensive, because there are no buses. So it's not just that you don't have internet access at home, it's that to get internet access is a 7-kilometer walk. As a university, we have a very strong focus on community engagement, and in fact, that's a generic statement about South Africa. People talk about 3 pillars of higher education being teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. And there's a lot of literature around that. In South Africa, the community engagement is actually codified into law in the Higher Education Act, and that's partly to address some of the problems that result from the legacy of apartheid, and because we have townships that look like those photos. So the Jozi Youth Hub is a community engagement project of the university that's located right in the middle of that township. And it's built as a community enabler. It hosts a number of NGOs that do really good work in the community, all sorts of different things. We have an NGO teaching students music, and they approached us with the problem of, we need some internet access to be able to do our work. And we looked at this problem from a number of different kind of perspectives. There's no ADSL there. There's no, the telephone exchange just simply doesn't support it. The copper gets stolen. So telephones to them are provided over DECT. And so the traditional ways I'd get internet access to people just don't work. So we looked at near line of sight things. We were going to run WiMAX from a high site. We looked at this problem and we realized we needed to build some sort of high site at the location. And then we came to a realization that this particular location, of all the locations in our town, is very special because it's the one location in the township that has line of sight. And it's a weird coincidence because if I move 10 meters either way, I have a mountain in the way. And so this gives us a unique position that can see back to our campus, but it also gives us a high site on a flat plateau. And it's next door to a public library. Now, for some years, we've been trying to figure out how to get into public libraries because we've realized that if we put internet access, if we put eduroam into public libraries, particularly public libraries in the townships, we can change the way our students who are in the townships experience their learning experience. More importantly, in a larger perspective, we can do it for other students who are not from our campus. So we built a 12-meter lattice mast, and there's a bit missing, but anyway, so this is the construction of it. It was erected by volunteers, so we had no budget for this. This was a pie-in-the-sky idea. Somebody was me, said, let's go and build a mast. I have no photographs of it being erected because we roped the photographer into actually helping us erect the mast. And this was a learning experience because this is something we'd normally contract out. So that's me climbing a 12-meter lattice mast. And I had to learn stuff about civil aviation regulations and health and safety. And we have very different perspectives of health and safety to most of the rest of the world. But I didn't fall off, and I'm here, so that's a good thing. And we put some wireless kit on the top of it. And this is really cheap, entry-level consumer wireless kit. This is Ubiquiti power beams. But it works. We offered it to the municipality as a high site, and there was a strategic reason for that because we forgot to ask them for planning permission. And it turns out that the mast is outside the office of the guy who grants planning permission, which is a little bit of a problem. But it's, they were quite interested in the high site, so we got planning permission. They've never actually put anything on it, and that gets us to bits about our municipality. So we have, that's a map of town. From the left-hand side to the right-hand side is about 9 kilometers. What's not visible so well in here is that there's a ridge that runs kind of about there, which is our line of sight problem. And there are 5 municipal libraries, and the university obviously has a library. So to give you some idea, this is the main library in the center of town. It's a lovely old building. Built in the late 1860s. And that's a view of the inside of this library. This is Duna Public Library, which is the second oldest library, and this is in the township. This is the street it's in, so that gives you some idea of what's around it. That doesn't show very well, but there's some of those tin shacks that I'm viewing from the front door. This is Extension 9 Modular Library. This thing is basically 2 shipping containers. And again, it's surrounded by a very impoverished community. So these are the locations that we're trying to get into. We're trying to say, if we can bring internet access into these locations, we can change the experience of people who live here. And particularly in our case, we're trying to change the experience of our students because that's really what we care about. Just to give you some contrast, that's the main university library. That's the inside of a main university library. So there's a stark difference here. And this is, the Gini coefficient doesn't explain this difference, but the pictures do. Our public libraries are understaffed. We have 1 professional librarian in 5 public libraries. They open erratically. The reason I don't have any photos of the insides of those libraries is that despite the fact that I went in the middle of the working day, the libraries were closed because they were having a meeting. They're widely used as study venues by schools and university students. In some places, because of electricity issues, people who live in shacks don't have electricity. That's the only place you've got light. It's the only place you've got a desk to sit at. And they have really poor ICT infrastructures in their own right. So just to demonstrate this is the main library in the center of town. This is their circulation desk. And that cardboard box is their network. There is a little D-Link 8-port switch in that box that provides their network. And what's really concerning is that they think that's okay. That works. So we have this idea of putting wireless into your library, and we want to build some infrastructure in your library, and we want it to be reliable. and you think that's okay. And so there's a disconnect between what we want to do and what you think we want to do. So, given the state of our municipality, and a little tangent on the state of our municipality is under public administration because it owes debtors 100 million rand. That's, I'm trying to think, it's about 10 million US dollars, roughly. Including they owe the local electricity supply authority about 60 million rand. And our council is basically dysfunctional. So given this, with some advice from our community engagement office, we opted for a grassroots approach. We didn't go and ask the municipality for permission. We went to the librarians and we said, we want to put some stuff in your library. We'll sort it out with your bosses later. We had to negotiate priorities with the library staff. Our priorities were different to theirs. Our priorities were getting to the libraries furthest away, because those are the people who we really feel for. Their priorities are, we have this big library in the center of town, we think you should do that one too. There's some negotiation there, and it turned out to be quite easy. It's all done with point-to-point wireless. And we have access points presenting both the eduroam asset, and Always On is a commercial hotspot provider. So we backhaul the commercial hotspot provider back to our campus where they reach out into the rest of the internet. Which basically means we cover everyone, but not in an ideal way. Because eduroam is great for students. It doesn't help the members of the public who use the libraries. Always On does, but it costs money. And so we're still looking for a solution that doesn't cost money, that kind of reaches to the community more generally. There are governance and legal challenges to that we still need to figure out. But the eduroam thing was to try and, as a first step, empower students. Our students, the students from the distance learning universities. Now, the interesting thing for us in this is that the distance learning universities far outnumber our own students. So what did we achieve? This was really disappointing. So this is the number of connections from one of the access points, and it's really, really low, and we went to a lot of effort, and nobody is using it, and we didn't understand why. And particularly, we didn't understand why because UNISA, being the largest distance education university, has 400,000 students, and we know that they have a few hundred living in our townships. Why are they not using it? So when I put the proposal for this together, I thought I was going to come here with this nice success story of we put some eduroam into the township, and it's fantastically used, but the reality is it's not. So then we had to look at why. And one of the things is, how do you tell people that the service is there? I don't know how to advertise it. Another one is student access to eduroam. So it turns out that UNISA, the distance education learning, does not give their students access to eduroam. They reserve it exclusively for their staff. I've yet to figure out why. And so the reason their students are not using it is because they can't. And in fact, we've spoken to some of their students, and they know it's there and they want to use it, but it's not available to them. So this is a problem I've got to solve going forward. The time of year we did this wasn't great. It was at the end of the year. People were packing up for vacation. So that snapshot has changed a little bit now. We've rolled out some more libraries, and the take-up there is slightly better than that graph shows. The library opening hours turn out to be a really big problem because they're only open during the working day. They don't open at the night when students go home and actually want to study. During the day, they're on our campus and they have good connectivity. That's not the problem I'm trying to solve. And the library staff who think that network is okay really don't get this wireless thing. They don't have devices of their own. We offered to connect them. They don't have anything to connect with. And this was a little tangent. About a month after we installed this, we had a lightning strike take it all out. And because we did this really on the cheap, we didn't have any spares in stock, and the supplier had no spares in the country, and it took us 6 weeks to get new ones, and that's not a good way to build a reputation. So we learned some things in the process. Anything involving volunteers takes an immensely long time. Everything involves goodwill and fitting around other people's schedules, and it took us months to get a mast up. Grassroots approaches in libraries got things done, but it doesn't change the library's opening hours. And the only way we're going to do that is to actively engage with the high levels of council. We realized that we should have included the university library staff in this, except that when we tried to eventually, they actually weren't that interested. Not because they were uninterested in what we were doing, but because they've basically given up on our municipal libraries. They think that they're so dysfunctional that they're not worth investing in. And my point about not having spares, yeah, whatever your budget constraint is, spares are an important thing, and we now have some spares. And so that takes us to where we are now. We're continuing this project, despite the fact that it hasn't worked the way we thought it was. The impact is not as significant thus far as we thought. We're continuing it. For those students who are using it, the ones we've spoken to, the impact is immense. It's changed the way they work. They're not walking into our campus to come and read their email anymore. They're walking to the library 500 meters down the road, and that's a big difference. The other thing is that the project aligns with broader strategic initiatives of our university in the country about changing the way people have access, about trying to address that digital divide. I figured out how to get some sustainable funding for this, so at least for the next few years, I've got budget, which really helps. And the last thing is, I need to deal with the fact that other universities don't let their students use this, and I just don't get it. But that's a challenge for me. And so that's what we're doing. That's my story.
Thank you very much. I think this is a real powerful example of what the difference technology can make in different environments. And welcome some questions for Guy. Anyone here? Nick. Sorry, so I'll bring you to the mic.
Thanks, Guy. This is really cool. Have you talked to any of the identity management people at the distance learning university?
I haven't yet. So it happens that immediately after this, I'm going to another conference where they will be there. So I've actually offered to represent this same presentation at that conference.
Cool.
And yeah, I want to engage with them.
Yeah.
I haven't had an opportunity yet because I really want to understand why they're not providing access to
when you
the
find
students.
out, let us know, because I think it would be great to be able to put pressure on the right places.
It seems bizarre to us. I mean, I just don't get it.
Oh, some more over here. Just 1 second. Here you go.
Hi. I was wondering, when you say your students are able to use the network at the campus, do you have an alternative network for them, not only eduroam? Because if eduroam was the only way of connecting, then probably this would be the answer for all students having access to it.
So in terms of our own students, our own campus, the only wireless network we publish now is eduroam. We do differentiate in terms of service between our own students and visitors to our network. But yeah, there's nothing stopping visitors to our network connecting from there. The big problem is, yeah, sure, people can come to our campus. It's a long way. It's a long way to walk.
If they can use eduroam at your campus, then they should be able to use it in the library.
So
right?
our students can, and our students are.
Okay.
Our students can and are.
Students that
It's
okay.
Part of what we set out to achieve in this was that we realized that this was more powerful than just our students. Our main objective was to enable our students, but there are other students from other universities who live in the same city, the distance universities, and we realized that actually contributing to them was about uplifting our own community as well. And that's the bit that we've been very disappointed with. We're not seeing that because it's those institutions that are not enabling their students. And they can't use it on our campus or in these libraries because they just can't use eduroam.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, I see one in the back. Do we have an extra mic? Thank you very much.
Hi there, JP Cormier, Google. I'm just curious as to maybe opening up the network with a captive portal, giving people 30 minutes of access, those kinds of solutions to give others access?
That's what we want to do.
Okay.
It's exactly what we want to do. We want to bring up another public asset with a captive portal that does exactly that. I've got some legislative challenges to overcome to be legally allowed to be able to do that.
Okay.
Their licensing issues, yeah. So that's on our future roadmap when we figure out how to do it legally.
All right, last question. Just 1 second.
Hi, Alan Buxley, Loughborough University. Just a point of information, we have a well-known university in the UK that also doesn't let its students use eduroam. It's staff-only territory. Their reason is actually the authentication system for students is different than that of their staff, and they're having difficulties doing integration work. They plan to have that launched this forthcoming academic year. I just wonder if it's a similar problem with this university you're dealing with, or if they aren't using the technology to separate staff and students onto different wireless LANs after authentication and don't want the students on their staff network.
To be honest, I don't know the answer, but I suspect it's the latter. I strongly suspect it's the latter. Generally, eduroam in South Africa's take-up has been quite poor, and a lot of it is perception problems. It's not understanding how to get the technology to work rather than the lack of identity infrastructure behind it. And so I'm kind of hoping that if I sit down with them and have a beer with them, we might get some progress on that.
All right, I think another hand of applause, please, and we'll get ready to start the speaker. So as the next speaker comes up, I think Philippe. I think one of the things to think about is, and this is going to be another plug for the TF Mobility mailing list and that community, not everyone is able to engage in the same places as some of the people in, this is a EU-focused conference, but there's many, many international attendees. And so the communities that people go toward, TF Mobility, that mailing list, that's a community open to the international community. And those are the places where, Guy, you can find others around there and help move things forward. And I'll pass it over to Philippe. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, so don't check on the internet the meaning of foobar. The meaning is really this one. So this is me. Chad is over there. That's what clickers are for. Oh, shoot, sorry. It was in your retina. I'm sorry. And Paul is going to be coming on stage in a few seconds. So it's all about upgrading our... We are the people operating eduroam in the US on behalf of Internet 2. We are eduroam. And we went through a major upgrade of our infrastructure, the top level, that is. So eduroam really in the US started in 2004, the first pilot we had, but really only started to pick up in 2009. And in 2009 we had about 2 connectors, and then 2010, and then right now we have a growth of 40%, so it's quite dramatic. And we are only 2 people managing that for daily operation, that is. And we needed to find solutions to really manage this thing more automatically. So if you see, we peak now at 25,000 users, unique users per day. So, and as you can also notice, people love to take their Christmas breaks here every January. So it's there. That required, what we face with that is our servers were experiencing actually a heavy load. We have 2 servers, TLRS1 and TLRS2. If you see the number of requests, those are requests per minute. We have about 200 requests per minute. Those are radius requests, not unique requests. So it's about 300,000 a day. And then this drop here that you see is because Paul Deckers and Chad and I had a discussion during dessert at Dublin. This is this is why you should get dessert at TNC.
Yeah, I guess the dessert was good, but what we talked about was maybe even better. Radius servers normally have a list of realms that they want to proxy, if it's a proxy server. And that's a list of regular expressions, and if your realm is on the bottom of that list, then your request is processed after all these other regular expressions are evaluated. So that can be relatively slow. The same logic can actually be applied in an SQL server, and in SQL it's a simple query, and it's actually relatively fast. So in 2003, before the TNC in 2014, I started playing with the idea of doing the lookups in an SQL database and testing what the performance and latency improvements were. Turns out that SQLite in our case was the best database for this compared to others, that there was indeed a significant drop in latency if you're one of the bottom realms that are routed. And I made some radiator code to make this work with a database. It reduced the load significantly. We talked about this. Philippe recognized the problem that their load was increased. It basically delivers a shortcut for the routing in the proxy servers for eduroam, and it allows you to do other things like prevent proxy loops, other crazy stuff just inside that specific code that does the SQL lookups, because you can specify that if the organization sending the request is the one receiving the request, the SQL query shouldn't match. So testing this out in the national proxies at SurfNet, we saw a significant drop in the load, a huge increase in the decrease in the latency as well. And here on the Tuesday graph, that's also total packets processed by one of the radius proxies. You see that there was some kind of loop that also increases the load on the machines. And as soon as the new code was implemented, I think mid-Thursday, you see a dramatic drop in the graph. And after the weekend, the lines were continuously low, just as Philippe showed in his graph. And then you continued.
Yes, so we had the conversation in Dublin, then we completely implemented the code. We went a little further, is that Paul was doing SQL for realm lookups, and Chad decided to go SQL all the way. Everything that used to be text-based in Radiator, which is one of the Radius server, is now completely SQL-based, which enable us to have Radiant client settings and realm lookups are done in SQL. And so you saw the performance gain, of course, which is great. As of today, we're still humming along at 30%, even though we get more and more institutions joining, and you saw the increase up to 25,000 requests a day. But the other part is that we used to have configuration tool where people could test their configuration remotely. But back when we had the previous configuration, we couldn't do that elegantly. People would literally submit tests or submit configuration change, and it would crash the server. So we had to stop those tools. Well, the move to SQL has enabled us to do a lot more in terms of remote tools for our community. So what we do with our interface is double. Yeah? You have a facing interface, which is for the users to see, the map, the list of institutions, the support, all the available services. Is it an SP? Is it an IDP? And also you can look at some statistics. So that's the part that is for users. And then you have the part that is for administrators, where they can check, they can manage their service locations, they can general information, what are your support information. They can check their own radius statistics. I'll do a demo of the interface. They can do the configuration tool, they can test their connectivity, and finally they can also take a view into our logs. It's to diminish our support time so that they can pre-troubleshoot issues before they contact us. If you go on our website, you can see here, I want to get access to eduroam. This is where we have a lot of students directly contacting us, like, hey, I want to get access to eduroam, what do I need to do? We cannot continue to just answer every single request. You know, we have, that's a lot of students, 300 institutions, an average of, there are about 20 million students in the US, there are 4,000 institutions, we have 300 connected. By the time we reach maybe the 100%, which is 4,000 institutions, I think we would be a little overwhelmed by the number of emails. So if you click on that, you can type your institution and you get immediately the support information of your own institution as well as the configuration URL. You can have different campuses for one institution. So that's one part of the information. If you want to know which institutions are available, if you're traveling, you can go check the list of US institutions. You can see when they were active, you can see what type of service is available and if they are active in progress. Again, that's for users. You can also check the US maps to see where it's available. You can, of course, drill down. It's standard Google Maps. You can go to the international maps, but you'll have to be a little patient. This map is becoming very large, so I'm going to make you wait. No. All right. And then you get the map. That's the map that's at eduroam.org, of course, that shows you all the locations in the world. There is an interesting point there is that locations are not standardized. It's not like an institution. You see Brazil, they don't have 993 institutions. It's 993 locations. Some people define locations, some people define institutions, some people define buildings. It can be anything. It can be one access point. So you can go check our statistics. You see here, that's the same graph that I was showing you. And if you go at the bottom here we also show, for people that are interested in joining eduroam, the different things that are available in the federation. We have not advertised the interface yet 100% to our connectors. So the connectors that have been filling the data so far are people that are experimenting with our interface, but it's ready for production. Actually, after the meeting here, we're going to announce it to the eduroam US community. So you have radius flavors. We have a lot of people asking us, what are other universities using? Preferred SSID is what some people refer to as your eduroam native, but when we tell them eduroam native, some people don't understand. So we actually need to change that to using eduroam as preferred SSID. But we have a lot of schools asking us, like, who is using it? So we used to be able to tell from memory how many, but now there are so many people that have switched to eduroam as a native SSID that it's better to have just a graph and show them. And also we have the peer types, corporations, museums, university. Corporation would be SP only. We have more and more corporations like, we would like to provide eduroam for our customers when they come on site. I'm sure there's no limitations as far as SPs are concerned. So that was the part that was available for the public. Now, if you are a school and you want to manage your peering relation with us, you go to eduroam admin login. You have many different ways to connect. You can use, we're working on having in common working, but we're having a Drupal issue. If someone is a simple SAML PHP and Drupal expert, please come see us. We need to talk to you. And but we have local accounts. We already had local accounts for people to be able to do some testing, so they can connect with that and then become an administrator on the interface. So the first thing that you see when you connect is that will be your campuses. I took University of Tennessee as an example. I'm basically, Chad and I have the ability to masquerade ourselves as any administrator, so if they have an issue, we can simulate what they are experiencing. So I made myself an administrator of University of Tennessee for this presentation. So you can see your campus. You can have all your different service locations there. And then one of the first things that I will lead you to is to the dashboard. So if you click on dashboard, as a university, you will be able to see how many people are joining your university as far as, so on the SP side. You may think, I can do that myself in Radius. Yeah, if you're a large university and you have all that spare time to look into your logs, it's great. But if you're a small university, you don't have a radius administrator on staff, it's great. We're going to increase the number of statistics that we show to see like where your people are going in the world, etc. So that's as far as how many people are visiting your university. If you go down the page, you see how many people are actually traveling from your university based on which realm. You can also change the scale of, what date you want. Those are sliders. The second aspect, we go back to the initial page. You can also edit the information that you provide as far as a connector. So you have 3 different tabs there: campus information, contacts, and miscellaneous. We'll start with campus information. Oh, this is vibrating. So you can have. We have the concept of institution, campus, and service location. So you can really define, you can have University of Tennessee in this case, and then you can have sub-campuses, and then for a campus you can have service location. So it took us a while to get to these definitions because there are so many different ways the different university systems are being organized. So we had to find one that would match all of them. So here you can enter your address. This will be also enter in the XML that we submit to that eduroam.org pulls from us. So to feed the eduroam.org international map. So it's automatic. It's like DJ NRO does these things as well, which was presented last year at the TNC 2014. So the next thing you fill out is a campus URL, the policy URL, the eduroam configuration URL, and these things will show up on the website. So if you want to change your eduroam configuration URL as an administrator, you just change that over there. So we don't have to interact with you for that. You manage your own relation on the website yourself. And then you can also put a banner and upload a logo for your university. The next tab is contacts. For contacts, we explain to you what is published there. So this is the administrative contact, the technical contact. You can add as many contacts as you want, but we'll tell you if they are published or not, and we'll tell you where they go so that you don't put your personal cell phone number there. We have the technical contact, support contact, and finally the abuse contact. The last one is the miscellaneous information. So are you an IDP, are you an SPA, are you an IDP, NSP? Which radius server are you using? So we use that in the statistics that I just showed you to previously. Are you using eduroam as a preferred SSID? What campus type are you? University, college, K through 12? And finally, you have your administrator account, but you can add more administrator if you want more people to manage the interface. The final one in the management of your campus is the location. So we use Google Maps. You can be as granular as you want. We hope that, in terms of world domination of eduroam, people will post as many of these dots so we can beat Brazil. Just kidding. So you go there, you enter, you click on the map. It's traditional Google map. You click on it, and you'll have a service location. Again, you decide what a service location is. It could be a campus. It could be a building. You can decide to have every access point on your campus, but it's going to be hard on the Google Maps, I think. As far as the definition of that location, you can define what is the SSID. Again, it's being fed as an XML to the eduroam.org map. What type of encryption you provide? Do you have port restriction? Do you have IPv6 enable? Are you nothing? Number of APs? Do you provide support for wired connection? You can put an information URL. And you can also put a support contact for that service location. So that was for the general information, the information that you submit, and that's being posted online. So now we have a bunch of different tools. I'm going to show you the realm testing tool. Okay, we're on time. The realm testing tool is for a university that would like to know if their realm is working to them. Is one of their visitors going away working? So we only let you pick the realm that you send us, You can put username, that's whatever you have decided as far as your test account is. So you define your own test account on your own radio server. And then you can decide what you want as far as you type your method that you want to test. And then you can also change the inner identity if you have, let's say, NPS and you're not doing rel stripping, you have some issues. You can put an inner identity that doesn't have the realm if you want to test. So that will give you a response, you're connected, you're not connected. It's extremely useful, especially when we start the peering and people are fooling around with their radius and they're not yet ready. We tell them, go do the realm testing tool. It saves us a lot of time when we do a peering relation with schools. Well, yeah, if you look at this one, below, if you go below, we also let you test IPTLS, so you can enter your user certificate, private key, and then you run your tests. And if you have a key passphrase for your certificate, you can enter it as well. So that's the realm testing tool. The next one is the config tool. So this is, some schools really go through a lot of changes. They do eduroam initially one way, then they decide that they're going to formalize it a different way. They'll change the servers. They want to change the passphrase. They want to add a server. They want to remove servers. That's a lot of change. So with the config tool, you can literally configure every Radius client configuration that you want. You can add the operator name yourself. So we will tag an operator name on your behalf if your Radius server does not do it itself. So you can do it for the top level 1 or the top level 2. You select what you need. The next level is that we let you change your realm handlers for each domain that you have. We let you assign whichever Radius server you want to do. You have here tnc.edu, utk.edu. And then finally, we ask you to fill the current secret that you have as a verification so that we're sure that you are who you claim you are and that you already have an existing relation with us. I know you're already authenticated, but it's an extra step because now you're really submitting changes to our Radius server. We want to make sure that your relation with us is approved. So that was for the config tool. Now we're going to switch to the log viewer tool, which is extremely useful. I mean, we let you select authorization logs, so TLRS1 or TLRS2, you can pick. We show you timestamp, username. A lot of people have doubts about their peering relation. They're like, we have a user visiting. We would like to know if at least the request left our servers. So at least they can go on the website and see that the request left their server and hit the top levels. So it's a nice factor of a nice level of troubleshooting that removes some doubt on their side. Finally, you can check the error logs. And again, I did the example moving that same university to TLRS2. Again, extremely useful. I use it myself before I go dig deeper in the Radius logs. And also we have, you can do filtering on what kind of log you want to see. So you can put a date range. You can put if you have a specific error you're looking for or a user you're looking for, you can filter on that. All right. Actually, I'd like to make an homage to Milan. Milan left us, and it was in the member meeting, the fall member meeting 2010. We were talking together about how to manage the people that don't have eduroam credentials. And Milan and I brainstormed quite a bit over this, and that's how the eduroam idea came about. It was to be able to manage people that are not part of your institution. So it's, in a sense, is how to welcome eduroam users on your network that do not have eduroam credentials, or the other side is how to extend the eduroam coverage for other people so that we could go in coffee shops more easily. And so that's where the Enable eduroam came from. So you can go on our website and you can decide, this is the first step. Yeah? We have put an on-off switch. So you can decide on your own to accept any Roam credentials on your eduroam SSID. So this goes, again, last year there was the EVA, I think, eduroam visitor access, what was done by SurfNet. So it's the same idea. We welcome on the eduroam SSID is there. People don't want to add more SSID on their campus. So how can we use the eduroam SSID to welcome more roaming consortium before we are, in a sense, enabled on Hotspot 2.0? And so once you have enabled that, we can welcome you with the eduroam credentials. So we have a website where you can go, and we use CloudPath as a backend, and we can give you basically an EPTLS certificate. At the moment, we base it on your cell phone. We send you a text message, and then you get an eduroam identity. If you have that, we give you a certificate, an EPTLS certificate that is installed automatically on your device, and you can use it for a year. So if schools want to welcome their visitors, like, you know what, we trust the eduroam credentials, you can handle all your visitors that way. If a visitor is misbehaving, we will let you disconnect them, or you can disconnect it yourself. And so you basically, and with that SSID, if you live in a town that has a lot of schools that have eduroam, and if you don't want to have the user constantly re-registering their identities, you're good for a year. You can go anywhere you want where it's available. Voila. I think Chris thought that we would never make it with 48 slides in so little time, so we made it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was going to say, is there any questions? And I think a hand shot up before I even asked. I see lots, so I think there's going to be a few questions, so we'll leave Philippe on the firing line. Here we go.
Miroslav Milinovic.
It's not about the maps, Miro.
No. So no introduction needed. Nice presentation, Philippe. I have a problem. I have a question about the statistics you were showing.
Yes.
What is behind? Do you use, for the SP stats, you have shown the traffic?
Correct, yes.
So do you use the logs of your national radius proxies, or do you use the F-sticks as a technology, or you have the access to the logs of the SP?
We use the logs of the top level.
So by showing that graph, you are actually not showing the local eduroamers.
No, we're not showing the local.
Okay,
use.
so
no.
this means that the traffic is probably higher to a quite substantial percentage. The real usage of the eduroam inside the campus
well,
is
but the
probably
real
higher.
user of eduroam, they're not roaming, yeah? They're using just their
Okay, so this is...
hopefully these people know how many users are using their wireless network.
Yeah, that's fine, but I mean, just wanted
No,
to be clear about
but that is
what's
correct,
behind.
yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, over at the back there, please. Sat.
The idea of eduroam actually looks to be quite cool. The question I have is, those users that come on are not part of the institution, but sort of kind of guests. Does it actually have any implications on the licensing side? Because eduroam pretty much has been working with one institution, for example, A having eduroam in institution B, and the users amongst them kind of can roam.
You're talking about any roam there?
Yes.
Well, eventually, the eduroam is the roaming consortium, yes? So the fact that you use the SSID, you are using one SSID. We are moving to Hotspot 2.0, so what does the SSID mean? I mean, today, it's your campus, yeah? It's your network. You decide to use the eduroam. It is not, remember, we are not breaking, it's off by default. It's an opt-in, yeah? So you cannot come here and use any roam credentials. You can only use it where people decide locally that they will welcome them.
Okay. The other question is that for short-term use, or it can be used for long-term?
It's 1 year certificates.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's a decision today. I mean, we can change that.
Okay, I'm just looking across the audience. I know there were a couple hands. Any other questions? Yes? Just a second, Neil.
Is the software you've developed open source?
No, it's so intricate between Drupal and SQL and all the things that we have not worked on making it open source. We've worked on making it work at the moment. So And that's the... Yeah, I'm sure some people will be interested, but you have to run Drupal and SQL and Radiator. Those are the three elements. And it's pretty intricate, like I said.
Yeah, we have another question on the other side of the room, please. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for the walkthrough of your sports server in the US. It looks very familiar to the stuff we have in the UK too. We've both reinvented that wheel. I noticed though that you don't seem to have a monitoring solution as part of yours. So you've got all their details, the shared secrets, but the username for their testing is just on demand. Are you thinking about adding a sort of a username so you can do monitoring with either Nagios or something from your end to have statistics and that? And also when they add their Radius servers clients, I didn't see any information about it in terms of what the platform was, and yet you had those pie charts. So where was that information about whether it's FreeRadius 3 to Radiator? How is that actually collected?
So the information for statistics is part of the miscellaneous information that I show on one of the fields. Yes? So each school feels that they feel that themselves. So they might not feel it. So we cannot force them to do it. So that's why it's 100. It could be 100% of only 6 people responding. So we don't have any certainty there. And what was your first question? Was about authentication?
Monitoring. So you could monitor whether they're currently validating their users, so they're working as an IDP, if you monitor them all the time.
We do monitor them all the time, yes. But it's not a display on the interface at the moment, no. Yeah. Since we have their accounts, that's the initial reason why we had accounts, is because we use the accounts to monitor them. Again, it's free will. If they want to, they have one. If they don't, we don't monitor them. But so we have not published the information about being the school being up. But actually, we plan to use that the log, not the logs, but the uptime, the monitoring of eduroam.org for that.
So my question is.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is for you or for Paul. That move from the statically configured Radiator, especially on the Realm lookup, where you've gone to using SQL, have you retained the ability to do that regular expression match? And is it just more efficient in SQL? Or have you dropped the regular expression, you're just doing a string match on an index or something?
No, the regex is still there. It's just faster.
I think Paul's going to weigh in on that.
In my case, the regex isn't there. What the regex was used for is just to find the top, the most significant part of the domain, do it in lowercase, and with a right SQL query, you can just do that in the database itself. We still use the handlers actually in the configuration. We just jump to the right handler based on the result of the SQL lookup, which gives a little bit more flexibility in specific settings that you want to put in the handler, but it doesn't allow you to make a system like Philippe has.
Okay. Thanks very much. I think that's great. Another round of applause, please. So we're going to shift over to Neil, and when we assemble the session, it's kind of like having that international flight, and as you jump from hop to hop, it's a little bit jarring. You go from one topic to the next and to the next. But this is the reality that in the eduroam ecosystem, you're going to have different places and different types of backgrounds and environments and technical depth, and what's important to one region at a certain time is different than another. And passing off to Neil about the Asia Pacific region. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Neil Witheridge. I am the administrator of eduroam Australia. I work for ARNet. We're the national roaming operator for eduroam Australia. So what I'll be talking about today is the current status of eduroam in the Asia Pacific. APAC is the Asia Pacific region. I'll talk about the eduroam infrastructure just briefly. Now, the main topic really is the TAIN-funded project, which is called Extending eduroam in the Asia Pacific, and I'll call that ZEAP. So if I use the term ZEAP, that's what it means. I'll look briefly at the requirements, sort of generic requirements for eduroam uptake, which actually influence the selection criteria that we have to choose countries that we'll be focusing on to extend eduroam in the Asia Pacific. I'll talk about our plans to establish an Asia Pacific eduroam confederation and talk about what we're going to be doing in this project in terms of training and the challenges that we're facing in terms of what sort of training we'll provide. And I'll look then briefly at what we're planning for beyond ZEEP. So this is the current uptake of eduroam in the Asia Pacific. We have 12 countries that are listed there. We actually started eduroam, I think, in the Asia Pacific. ARNET had an eduroam project group working closely with eduroam Europe. And this was really a 4-year program of institutional engagement and working with other countries in the Asia Pacific region to deploy eduroam. We have some countries that are preparing to participate. Those countries that are listed there as already participating are recognised by the Global Eduroam Governance Committee. That means these countries have signed the eduroam compliance statement, which is the global policy for eduroam, and are operating eduroam. Countries that are preparing to participate, that is, they are not yet officially recognised by the GGC, the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, Malaysia and Pakistan. There are countries that are planning to participate via ARNET, Fiji, the Oceania countries. And there are countries that were once participating but no longer do, and this is Papua New Guinea. Now, I don't expect you to read this, don't try to read this. We conducted a survey of APAC national roaming operators. And I'd just like to thank Hideaki Goto, who helped me to create this survey. Basically, it was focusing on some important information pieces that we considered as the things we'd want to talk about at this, the Global Eduroam Governance Committee would be interested in. For example, who runs eduroam, who operates eduroam, who's the national roaming operator, are they the National Research and Education Network provider? And what resourcing is provided? How many full-time equivalent, FTE stands for full-time equivalent, staff do they allocate to eduroam? How many higher education institutions are in the country? How many of those participate in eduroam? And what are the total institutional participants? So there's not only universities, there may be institutions that operate as service providers only. And what about usage? What are the maximum authentications that occur? And how many of those authentication logs indicate that it was a successful authentication or an unsuccessful authentication? And then we move on to more like a governance topic. Are those national roaming operators aware of the Global Eduroam Governance Committee? Do they feel that they are adequately represented? And would they join an Asia-Pacific confederation if it meant that they had better representation at the Global Eduroam Governance Committee? And finally, do they have a national eduroam policy? So I'm going to talk about just a few of these items in the next few slides. So just doing some sort of interpretation and calling out some implications of the results. You might notice that we had a fantastic response, 10 out of 12, and I think that's really good for this sort of survey. Only India and the Philippines haven't responded, everyone else has. So firstly, looking at eduroam uptake. Now you'll see the number of higher education institutions. What you see across the Asia Pacific, of course, is a huge amount of diversity. So in China we have a huge number of higher education institutions, yet they're a new national roaming operator, so the uptake is quite small at the moment. In Australia, we have only 40 higher education institutions, and 39 of those are participants. And I think partly, the reason for this is partly that there was such an emphasis on institutional engagement when eduroam was introduced into Australia. And I think this is a really important point. And when we're talking about extending eduroam in countries in the Asia Pacific, then I think an important lesson from the experience in other countries that you need to have a program of institutional engagement. So whoever is operating eduroam really needs to talk to institutions to have a program of education, of promotion for institutions. Otherwise, you won't see that uptake for a long time. It'll be more organic. It'll take much longer for institutions to come on board. So there's plenty of scope to grow. As you can see from those statistics, in the Asia-Pacific regions that currently operate eduroam, there's a huge scope to grow in terms of uptake. In terms of usage, so here we have some figures. The figure in brackets is the number of unique users. The figure with outside brackets is the total number of logs. And these figures come from the maximum authentications on a peak day to date in 2015. So on the peak day in 2015 for Australia, we had 545,000 logs that were successful, 324,000 logs that were unsuccessful. Now I think it's another lesson from this result is that there's quite a large number of unsuccessful logs. So some countries have better ratios than others. And I think this comes down to education, user education. A lot of these unsuccessful logs is because people aren't using the right credentials or are not configuring their devices correctly. So this is, and once again, a very large amount of diversity in terms of the usage in countries. In terms of resourcing of eduroam, typically resourcing by operators of eduroam is quite low compared to, say, a SAML federation. I've had the advantage of working in the SAML Federation world and the eduroam Federation world, probably the same amount of time, 5 years in each, approximately. And the technical complexity of both federations is pretty much the same. Sure, eduroam is, sorry, I've gone ahead a bit. So eduroam is a service that is currently for a specific purpose, right? It's a network access service. And of course the SAML federations allow access to lots of different types of applications. But they both have areas of complexity. I mean, it's more, on the SAML side, it's more attributes and how you actually get institutions to provide the information, how services use those attributes. But as you saw from the previous presentation from Philippe, there's in the SAML world, there is such a wide variety of radius implementations that operators need to be on top of in terms of providing support to institutions who might choose these different radius implementations. Whereas in the SAML world, you basically have Shibboleth or Simple SAML PHP. But the point I'm making is that resourcing is quite low in terms of eduroam operation in the Asia-Pacific region. So it does limit the ability to devote resources to improving the service. Now, would you join the APAC Eduroam Confederation? Well, there's broad support for joining an APAC Confederation, and I'll talk a little bit later of what an APAC Confederation means. But fundamentally, we debated this in the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, and all we could agree on is what a confederation really means is a relationship with the Global Eduroam Governance Committee. So the goal, of course, of a global governance committee is to be globally representative. So how to formalise that relationship? On the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, we have 2 representatives from the various world regions. What are the responsibilities of those representatives in terms of getting input from each country they represent and providing output from the Global Eduroam Governance Committee? So I'm looking towards establishing, I think it's a good goal to look towards establishing an APAC Eduroam Confederation as part of this ZEEP project. Just very quickly, the APAC we do run top-level radio servers in the Asia-Pacific region. So we have countries that run their national radio servers, and we also run top-level radio servers. And the decision to do this was taken pretty early on, and I guess the main reason was in terms of network path length and being close network-wise to Europe and US, and being just network efficiency. There has been discussion as to whether we should actually only have one, and the European run top-level radio server. So this is basically what it looks like for the current hierarchy of radio servers in eduroam. So at the bottom we have institutional radio servers that operate as an identity provider. They authenticate the users, or service providers. They provide access to the network to visitors. Then we have a national radio servers, and we saw in the APAC we have 12 national roaming operators who probably run a couple of national radio servers. So the APAN top-level radio servers here. So we see that there's some so these countries is in APAC, there's China, India, Korea, Singapore, Thailand. They talk directly to the European top-level radio server. And the reason for that is it was the Europeans who actually worked with these countries to get them on board. In terms of the work that ARNET did in the global eduroam project, these were the countries that we were engaging with, and that's why they actually are connecting to the APAN top-level radio server. Okay. So there is some discussion as to whether this works. There is some administrative hassle about running multiple top-level radio servers. There are special cases of configuration that have to be made. But I won't go into the details there. We probably don't have the time to do that. But this is a picture of the radius hierarchy for APAN. We do run a top-level radio server. We do provide that service to a number of the APAC countries. Okay, so as I said, the main focus of this, really I wanted to be on the project that TAIN is funding. Now, who's familiar with TAIN? Do people understand what TAIN is? Okay, so I brought this up just to read a statement on what TAIN is. So TAIN is basically a European Commission initiative, and from their website, the Trans-Eurasian Information Network, that's TAIN, uses the ICT technologies to increase regional cooperation with Asian countries and to bridge the digital divide of less developed regions. Okay, and we have an organisation called TAIN Star CC, or TAIN Cooperative Centre, which actually manages this work. So they have accepted a proposal. Actually, there was a meeting in October last year where ARNET's business development director and one of the directors of TAIN talked about initiating this project. So we prepared a proposal which was accepted by TAIN. So they provided €350,000 to run this project. And ARNET will be the project leader, and we'll be collaborating with other mature national roaming operators in the region. Basically, the project means selecting 5 target countries for guided and assisted deployment, funding some hardware purchasing, funding workshops and travel, helping these countries to join eduroam. And there's a list of eligible countries there. I won't go through the list. But some of these are very large countries. They have very large educational infrastructures and potentially very important, well, of course, very important from a research point of view. And we also intend to produce outputs, create outcomes that can be shared by all current national roaming operators in Asia Pacific. So this is the project team. Basically, ARNET will be the project lead, and we'll have a TAIN CC representative. We're going to select 2 project partners, and it's currently in the process of invitation here, and they'll contribute to and execute the plan for national roaming operator and institutional workshops and the deployment of eduroam. We'll also have one project technical partner because we see a key factor in this project is to develop an admin tool. We saw Philip talking about an administration tool. It's a key thing for the national roaming operator to allow institutions to manage their own presence in eduroam. And we're going back to looking at the manpower, the resourcing of national roaming operators. You know, shoestring budgets don't allow operators to look after 60, 70, 100 more institutions. So it's a huge advantage to allow those institutions to self-administer their participation in eduroam. So this project technical partner will be chosen to develop the tool to provide that administration, but also to do some basic metrics, basic monitoring. We already have the CAT tool. We'll be using that for device configuration. A new thing that we want to introduce is automated auditing for onboarding institutions into eduroam. We see a key thing to provide consistent deployment as some form of automated auditing. And this is basically, one thing would be auditing radio servers, how their radio servers configured, what attributes are released, what attributes are not released that come from access points. Are there any, is there provision to have some sort of blacklisting of realms that may come from wireless infrastructure? We see a lot. Basically, we want to stop unnecessary traffic coming out. Another thing is, what do we do with accounting requests? eduroam doesn't care much about accounting, so we only want to see authentication requests coming from service providers, from institutional radio servers. We don't want to see accounting requests, so they should be terminated internally. So just looking at eduroam prerequisites, so we're thinking about how to select these countries. So basically what the prerequisites, I guess, and requirements for eduroam uptake, eduroam does use a trusted protocol. We want to have trusted infrastructure operators that run that well. So basically eduroam delivers a trust model that meets the requirements of the service. But that's also debatable. What is the trust requirement of eduroam? And what is it now, and what will it be in the future? In the future, we may want to use eduroam authentication to authenticate users to some broadband mobile access or LTE access. Now it's Wi-Fi. So we have a certain level of trust requirements now, but what about in the future? Another requirement for eduroam is to have national roaming operators that are technically and administratively capable. Institutions likewise. And the prerequisites, though, for eduroam in institutions, of course, is identity management at institutions, and to have best practice identity management, and also to have a wireless infrastructure that works well. Institutions that don't provide a reliable wireless infrastructure most likely shouldn't be providing eduroam. It will damage the brand of eduroam, because basically if things go wrong with eduroam access that are because of poor wireless infrastructure, it's eduroam that wears the blame. And of course, the other thing, we need customer demand for eduroam, institutional demand. So it requires that countries have an appropriate strength or energy of an R&D sector. So these are the target country selection criteria at a very high level. So the countries in APAC that will benefit, that will be the target countries, and I said there are 5 target countries. They need to be attained beneficiary. They need to be not yet recognised as an eduroam roaming operator. They need to have a mature national research and education network provider who can operate eduroam. And that national roaming operator will also operate as an institutional participant. Of course, the operator will need to sign the eduroam compliance statement and commit the required resources to operate eduroam. Well, what are the required resources? It seems to be like one full-time equivalent person is what we can get away with. A demonstrable national demand for eduroam. That's more sort of, rubbery, I guess. But at least, the last point is an important point, 3 R&D institutions that are willing to operate as institutional eduroam operators, as an identity provider and a service provider. So it's 5 target countries. Each of those target countries will have 3 institutions, and they will be the beneficiaries of the project, the assistance and the funding assistance. So just repeating the project deliverables, those 5 target countries and 3 institutions. We'll be delivering a national roaming operator workshops and training materials, and we plan to do that this year. We'll also be planning and delivering institutional workshops, but it will be those national roaming operators in those 5 target countries that will be providing the training to institutions. We'll have the ZEEP project team member there, but in the national roaming operator training, if that's successful, they should be able to train their institutions. That's the idea. We want to establish an APAC eduroam confederation, create shared resources for APAC countries, reusing as much as possible, of course. It's not a huge budget for developing from scratch, so if we can reuse tools, great. And we'd like to contribute to eduroam globally, of course. So the admin tool. The admin tool that we're thinking about is like a modification of the tool called DJNRO. And I'm going to call that admin tool. I don't like the pronunciation of DJNRO. So this admin tool will identify what really needs to change or be the modifications required to make it easily adoptable in Asia-Pacific countries. I won't go through the details of this slide, I'm running a bit short on time, but there's an amount of work that's required to take the admin tool in its current form to a form that I think will be easily used by these 5 target countries' national roaming operators. The schedule. Selecting the target countries, of course, gathering resources required, starting off the admin tool development, establishing the APAC Confederation. Hopefully that will happen in 3rd quarter this year. 4th quarter, the workshops, probably mid-4th quarter, and deploying eduroam at the national roaming operators. The hardware and the software, all the stuff we'll buy for these countries, we'll use in the workshops. And so they'll be actually working with the hardware they'll take home and using to deploy eduroam. And beginning to engage with institutions. Those 3 institutions that each roaming operator chooses, we're beginning to engage with them. So in 2016, we'll have the institutional workshops around APAN 41. And then we'll have some sort of QA or operability testing. That will happen throughout, but a major QA effort in the 2nd quarter 2016. So there's a lot of work to be done in a very short time, but we think it's achievable. So let me just talk about the APAC eduroam Confederation. European, the way eduroam has developed in Europe, they have a confederation. They have a confederation policy, they have a steering committee, they have an operations team. It didn't develop like that in Asia Pacific. Okay, so these groups of Asia Pacific countries are seen to belong to a region that has global eduroam governance committee representation, but really no formal responsibilities, no formalised relationship between these countries and the global eduroam governance committee. So really that's what the APAC eduroam Confederation does. It formalises that relationship. But of course, if we have an APAC eduroam Confederation, then we may move towards a confederation policy. We may move towards having an operational team. Certainly we will have shared resources and a confederation website. One thing that I think is important that we consider, and especially the Global eduroam Governance Committee considers in terms of global uptake of eduroam and the way it's being rolled out, is this trust model aspect, and it's something that I'm thinking a bit about. So it's, eduroam operation is a lot more than deploying radius servers. In particular, identity providers need to take responsibility for their users. There needs to be accountability, traceability. Identity providers need to take action. So one way we can do this is through education, setting of policies like national eduroam policies, also improving standards of eduroam deployment. So this aspect of operability auditing, I think, is really an integral part of this work. So what we'd like to do is develop the resources and deliver the resources that are required to deliver a reasonably strong trust federation in this work we're doing in the ZEEP project. And beyond ZEEP, well, in the ZEEP project, we're basically focusing on these areas. The administration tool, based on the work coming out of the Greek national roaming operators, the device configuration using CAT, and auditing. So auditing is like a new area, but a critical area. And in the future, we will do basic monitoring and metrics. We won't get around to doing any added troubleshooting. But in the future, as I presented last year, the last TNC, we want to have a comprehensive suite of ancillary services that make operation of eduroam efficient and effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. So, some questions from the floor? Looking. I think that you'll see repetition in the activities in eduroam in different regional operators. It's not lost on the regional operators either. Everyone has to try to deliver a quality service, and depending on your staffing complement and depending on your talent pool and your skills and your resources, you have to pick and choose the tools. And I think when you take a look at an administration tool and what Philippe presented with US eduroam, what's available with eduroam CAT, you can see how a centralized delivery of some of those tools is beneficial, and you can see how they organically come up from the ranks in the regions for different purposes and different reasons. And there's a lot of, it's not like the GEGC has its own budget. It's part of a governance committee, and if you're looking for projects, we look to the community and the edge of our community, the people doing the work, to be able to contribute time. So as we see the eduroam grow, there's these products that emerge like eduroam CAT. So if there are no other questions,
so I'd just like to
thank.
I think Sang Young Kim in the audience. He's been working with me on getting this project happening. So thank you for that, and we're really looking forward to a great outcome in the ZEEP project.
And I want to say thanks to our speakers today. We had a great collection, and if we can get a round of applause, please. So there's only one or two things here. The other things I have to do as the chair. There's posters are on display in the exhibition area downstairs. And there's some demonstrations that are going on as well. And one, Arnes link, I'd probably pronounce that wrong, but improving eduroam client support on Microsoft Windows. There's a demo downstairs. So if you chose to be here for eduroam, there's some more eduroam at TNC. And I think for this session, we'll close it. Thank you very much for choosing to come to the session, and those for listening on the link as well.